Hello everyone, Alison here, and this is the second in my video series where I'm talking about the process of writing my latest book. So this is the first book in a new series, the Shadow City series, and it's going to be part of a book set collection called Cursed Lands, which is going live next May, so May 2019, but you can pre-order it now on iBooks, Nook and Kobo. So last week I was talking a bit about my inspiration for the book, and I also mentioned that I was supposed to start writing it last week. And I have started. I've written a little bit on it, but I have to admit that I'm a little bit behind schedule. I've got a couple of other projects I'm involved in at the moment, and one of them is an anthology, a dystopian stories anthology, which I'm coordinating, which is coming out at the beginning of January, and that also happens to be on pre-order. So if you want to get your hands on that now, it's called On the Brink, and I will put the links in the notes, the comments with this video. But anyway, I've been super busy proofreading all the stories for that anthology and doing a lot of sort of admin work around that. So that's my writings had to take a little bit of a backseat, which kind of makes me sad because I'm really happy when I'm writing, and when I don't write for a while then I get a little bit grumpy. But back on it next week, so hopefully I should have more progress to report on that when I do my video next week. And life happens, these things happen, so just got to keep going and keep plodding on with it. So today I'm going to talk a bit about plotting, and this is quite an interesting one. If you're a writer, then you've probably had endless conversations with your friends about whether you're a plotter or a pantser, and what your process is about writing stories and writing books. So my books are quite character driven. I think when you read them, the characters are quite strong, but I always tend to start with the plot and some plot events. And certainly when I first started writing, I felt that I should be a plotter. So I should be able to create this full outline of my story and my series, and go into a huge amount of detail and know exactly what I was going to write before I actually start putting words onto the page or typing into my computer. And I think this is a bit of a distinction. So some people do these full outlines. I've got a friend who does a very detailed outline for each of her books, and that's her process and way of working. There are other people who literally just sit down and start writing and see where the story takes them. As I'm sure you can appreciate, there are advantages and disadvantages to both approaches, and I think it very much depends how you work. There's no right or no wrong way. And in fact, I was at a conference earlier this month where a couple of sort of very well respected authors, particularly in the indie community, and very sort of high level authors were talking about their writing process. And interestingly, there were two of these authors, Dean Wesley Smith and Maxwell Alexander Drake, who literally said pretty much the opposite. So Dean Wesley Smith advocates what he calls writing into the dark, and if you look that up, he's got a sort of book and some more information on that on his blog, which is essentially you start writing and the story evolves as you go along. You don't spend a huge amount of time plotting. Drake, on the other hand, is completely opposite, and he says you have to plot everything and know exactly what's happening with your story, what the theme is, how these events reflect the theme before you start writing. So those, I think that just goes to show that you can do it either way, whatever works best for you. And as I said, when I first started writing, I felt like I should be a plotter. I should be organized and have everything down and know exactly what I'm doing before I start. And what I've realized is that I'm actually a little bit of a combination of the two. So what I'll usually start off with is I will have a basic structure for my story. I will know roughly what happens. I'll have some key points plotted out at different points through the story. And usually I'll have the first third to a half of the book pretty much detailed out, kind of scene by scene. So I know exactly what's going to happen on that. If I plot out, I found if I plot out the full book, then what happens is I usually get part way through and end up throwing half of it out the window, because what happens when I start writing is that my characters take over a bit and they're like, oh, actually, I'm going to do this in this scene and I might go off here. And sometimes that causes problems because it creates things that I then have to edit out later. But a lot of the time, I get a much more interesting, rich story because of that. And sometimes they even surprise me, like dying when I wasn't planning to kill them off. But hey, that happens. It's all part of the fun of being an author. So what I've done for this particular story is I've got an idea of the overall structure, and I know sort of pretty much what's happening for probably the first 50% of it. So what I'm planning to do is to write that, and I sort of trust the process of emergence, that as I'm going through that and as I'm writing, more ideas will start to develop and arise. And then what I'll probably do is when I get to the end of where I've sort of plotted to, if I'm not exactly sure where it's going to go next, then I'll stop for a bit, have a bit of a think about that and work it out in my head, and then plan the scenes for the rest of the book. And that's just my process. As I say, there's no right or wrong. It does mean that I have to do a fair bit of editing afterwards to sometimes add things back in or switch things around. And obviously, you know, it would be nice to be able to write a clean first draft right off the bat, but that's not how I work yet, and I'm not quite there. So hopefully that gives you a bit of insight into my plotting process. And if you are a new writer, then I recommend, firstly, accept the fact that you can do it either way and figure out what works best for you. There are a couple of really good books which I love. I've read so many books on plotting, it's it's insane, but a couple of the ones I really think are really good or useful is Save the Cat by Blake Schneider, and Take Off Your Pants by Libby Hawker. And one of them focuses kind of on plot and one of them focuses more on character, and I think I use a bit of both together. I think the story grid is also really good, but I think if for more advanced writers, if you're planning your first story or just doing some short stories, then it's quite in-depth and detailed and technical. And I think one thing I'm going to be trying with short stories, perhaps more than full-length novels, is Dean Wesley Smith's approach of writing into the dark. And I'm going to give that a go and see if I can work out if that works for me. So that's all for this week. Just a reminder, Cursed Lands is, as I said, on pre-order at the moment. We also do have a giveaway running this week, so I will pop the link to that in the comments as well. You don't have to pre-order or buy anything to enter the giveaway. You just pop your email address in, and we appreciate any shares. So any spreading the word is really great. So I will be back next Monday with another instalment talking about a different aspect of my process. Bye for now.